Hello, I'm Jennifer Degler. I'm a member at Emmanuel, and this devotion is about facing your COVID-19 situation with eyes of faith instead of eyes of unbelief. And we're going to be looking in Numbers 13, and this is where Moses has led the Israelites out of Egypt, and they are at the entrance to the Promised Land. And he has sent out 12 spies to get the lay of the land, and the spies come back. And we're going to see how 10 men who saw that challenging situation with eyes of unbelief, how they infected an entire nation with panic and with fear. And as a result, they had a very small picture of who God is. And then we're going to see 2 men who saw that same situation, that same challenge with eyes of faith, and how it makes God very, 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 very big, much bigger than any giant of a challenge we could face when we see our situation with eyes of faith. So let me read for you in Numbers 13, starting with verse 26. They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them and to the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here it is its fruit. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in the Negev. The Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea along the Jordan. Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can surely do it. But the men who had gone with him said, we can't attack those people. They're stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they'd explored. They said, the land we explored devours those living in it. All the people that we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. Look how infectious seeing a situation with eyes of unbelief. That is so infectious. What can you do to be a Christian who faces this COVID situation with eyes of faith? It's really important that we measure our giants against God and not against our own strength. Because when we do that, then we will see that God seems very small. We want to have instead a big God and little giants. As our pastor Ray Green said in a sermon, the size of your God determines the size of everything. It's so important that we remember what God has already done for us. The Israelites were forgetting all the miracles that God had done in Egypt. They were forgetting about the parting of the Red Sea. They were forgetting how God had made water flow for them in the desert. Time and time again, God had showed up for them. But you see, when we get infected with fear, when we start seeing our situation with eyes of unbelief, we forget what God has already done for us. We need to remind ourselves daily what God has done for us. It's also important that we don't dogpile our obstacles. You know, I get tickled when I look there in verse 29, where they say the Amalekites live here, and there's the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites and the Canaanites. I call them the parasites. They're everywhere. We all have ites. As we go through this COVID-19 situation, we have lots of ites. We have lots of obstacles. But when we dogpile them and think that we have to face all of them right now in this moment, then it's overwhelming. And we begin to see our situation with eyes of unbelief. The Lord was going to go ahead of the people and knock down those ites one at a time. And He will do that for you. He will go ahead of you in this situation and knock your ites down. But it's important that when you look at it, that you're not looking at it by dogpiling them all and thinking you have to face every single one of those situations today. I also want you to see how eyes of unbelief made them really begin to see things irrationally. There at the end of this passage, we seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. Not everyone in the land was a giant. They don't know what other people were seeing them like. But again, that's what happens when we see a situation with eyes of unbelief. Then we begin to spread fear. We don't see things clearly. We have a little God. It's so important as well that we look for the milk and the honey. Even in this COVID-19 situation, there's milk. There are things that are going to make us stronger, that are going to make our children stronger because of what we are going through. They're having to figure out how to entertain themselves. Children are. We're getting more family time together. We're having to go through hardship. We're going to experience suffering. We're experiencing loss. That is going to help promote resiliency. As a church, we are figuring out how to do things and reach people in new ways. That's milk. It's going to make us stronger. It's also important that we look for the honey. Yes, there's honey in the midst of this crisis. Absolutely sweet moments. Just like our church going out and doing car parades where we drive past people in nursing homes, that we can't go into the nursing homes and give them hugs, but we can have signs and we can hang out our car windows and say, I love you. We can deliver food to people that are on the front lines in healthcare and our first responders. There are sweet moments in the midst of this crisis. So we need to look for the milk and honey. And lastly, we need to look for and listen to our Calebs. There are people in the midst of this crisis who are speaking words of truth. They are encouraging us to turn to God. They are encouraging us to see Him as a big God in this situation, not a little God. So make sure you're listening to your Calebs, the people that are going to build your faith and encourage you to look at how God is going to provide. You can do this. Every day you can make the choice to see your COVID-19 situation with eyes of faith.